What happens when an unbreakable bond between twin sisters spirals into madness, tragedy, and a case so bizarre it defies belief? Hello, my wise listeners, and welcome back to The Wisdom of Sex. I'm your host, Dr. Heather Wisdom. Today, we're diving into an extraordinary tale that blurs the lines between love, obsession, and tragedy, the haunting mystery of the Eriksson twins. This story pushes the boundaries of familial bonds and raises deeply unsettling questions about human connection. It's a story you won't want to miss. But first, a word from today's sponsor. As someone who juggles 3 podcasts, a thriving private practice, and a never-ending stream of book deadlines, I'm often asked, Heather, how do you do it all without burning out? My secret is NutriHarmony, vitamin B12 drops. Their USDA organic vitamin B12 sublingual drops deliver 5,000 micrograms of vegan methylcobalamin, giving me the energy, focus, and mental clarity I need to stay at the top of my game. Not only do they enhance my metabolism and brain health, but their organic formula ensures I'm taking care of my body the natural way. You can find the link to these amazing drops on my website and in the episode description. Trust me, they're a game changer. Now back to our story. Picture this: Ursula and Sabina Eriksson, twin sisters bound not just by blood, but by a connection so intense, so unyielding, that it defied explanation and ultimately led them down a path of tragedy and infamy. Their story begins in the tranquil surroundings of Sweden, a life seemingly ordinary, marked by family, work, and the closeness of siblings. But in the spring of 2008, the Eriksson twins embarked on a journey that would unravel in a series of events as bizarre as they were horrifying. But let's rewind and start from the beginning. Ursula and Sabina Eriksson were born in 1967 in Sunne, a small town nestled in the rural countryside of western Sweden. Their early lives were marked by the kind of quiet, modest existence typical of the region. As identical twins, they shared an extraordinary physical likeness and an even deeper, almost impenetrable emotional bond. From a young age, those who knew them often remarked on how inseparable they were, seeming to function as 2 halves of the same person. They finished each other's sentences, mirrored each other's movements, and seemed to thrive in their shared world, one where the outside rarely intruded. The Eriksson family was solidly middle class, grounded in traditional Swedish values. Their parents, while not wealthy, provided a stable and loving home. Though there was nothing particularly unusual about their upbringing on the surface, the twins were known to be intensely private, even as children. They often kept to themselves, forming an insular duo that only deepened as they grew older. Teachers noted their closeness, though not in a way that suggested dysfunction, more as an unspoken understanding that the two simply preferred their own company. As they entered their teenage years, Ursula and Sabina's bond grew even stronger. While other siblings might have developed distinct personalities or sought independence, the twins seemed to rely on one another for emotional support and identity. Friends were few and far between. The twins seemed content in their shared bubble. It was a connection so profound that even family members occasionally felt excluded from the intricacies of their relationship. Interestingly, neither of the twins displayed signs of instability or psychological distress during these early years. On the contrary, they were described as kind, polite, and unremarkable in the best possible way. They participated in school activities, performed adequately in their studies, and gave little indication of the turmoil that would later dominate their lives. After school, their lives took separate paths geographically but not emotionally. Ursula eventually moved to the United States, while Sabina remained in Sweden to start a family. Despite the physical distance, the sisters maintained regular contact, their connection seemingly immune to the barriers of time and space. It was clear to those who knew them that their bond remained as strong as ever. In hindsight, this phase of separation may have been pivotal. Some experts speculate that being apart may have planted the seeds of the psychological unraveling that would later occur. Without their constant proximity, they might have experienced a sense of emotional incompleteness, a yearning that only grew stronger when they finally reunited in 2008. What's striking about their early lives is how ordinary they seemed, how grounded they appeared in comparison to the dramatic and violent spiral that would come later. It's this contrast, the mundane normalcy of their upbringing against the backdrop of their eventual actions, that makes their story so unnerving. What could cause two seemingly normal individuals, raised in a loving and stable environment, to descend into such chaos and destruction? The answer, if it exists, remains buried in the complex and often inaccessible depths of the human mind. So what happened? Let me take you to May 2008. Without warning or explanation, Ursula and Sabina left their home and traveled to England. Their departure baffled family and friends. There were no signs, no clues to what they were planning or why they had chosen to leave. What followed seemed ripped from the pages of a thriller novel, a spiraling series of actions that defied logic and reason, captivating the media and unsettling everyone who learned of their tale. The chaos truly began on the M6 motorway, one of England's busiest highways. CCTV footage captured a scene so surreal it bordered on the unthinkable. The twins sprinting across lanes of high-speed traffic, their bodies narrowly dodging vehicles as they threw themselves into harm's way. Ursula collided head-on with a truck. Sabina was struck by a car, and yet, shockingly, they survived. Their injuries seemed inconsequential to them. Both women rose to their feet with an almost superhuman determination, fighting off emergency responders with unrelenting force. Witnesses described their behavior as beyond comprehension, their faces blank, their movements robotic, as if they were driven by some invisible and overpowering force. Their actions weren't just reckless, they felt otherworldly. But the story didn't end there. While Ursula remained in the hospital due to her injuries, Sabina was discharged after only a short stay, and her behavior took an even darker turn. She was taken in by Glenn Hollinshead, a kind-hearted man who encountered her wandering the streets and offered her food and shelter. Tragically, his compassion would cost him his life. Without provocation, Sabina attacked and fatally stabbed Glenn the next day before fleeing the scene in a panic, leaping from a bridge in another attempt to evade capture. Remarkably, she survived yet again, only to be arrested shortly after. This cascade of inexplicable events left investigators and psychologists grappling for answers. What could drive two women, seemingly unremarkable before this, into a vortex of violence and chaos? The concept of folie à deux, a rare psychological phenomenon where two individuals share and amplify each other's delusions, was floated as a potential explanation. But even that didn't seem to fully encompass the depth of the mystery. Were they victims of an acute shared psychosis, or was something even more unsettling at play? The Eriksson twins' story leaves us with far more questions than answers, a chilling reminder of how fragile the human psyche can be. The trial of Sabina Eriksson unfolded in September 2010, over 2 years after the fatal stabbing of Glenn Hollinshead. Sabina was charged with manslaughter, and during the proceedings, she entered a plea of guilty with diminished responsibility. She did not dispute the fact that she had killed Hollinshead, but argued that her actions were the result of a transient psychotic state, one deeply influenced by the extraordinary events leading up to the crime. Psychiatrists who testified in her defense diagnosed Sabina with folie à deux, as well as a transient psychotic disorder. They explained that her mental state had been severely compromised at the time of the killing, suggesting that her delusional behavior during the motorway incident with her twin sister Ursula may have played a role in shaping her subsequent actions. Sabina's legal team emphasized her lack of prior criminal history and argued that her psychological condition was central to understanding the tragedy. Judge Saunders, who presided over the case, described the circumstances as truly extraordinary. He acknowledged the depth of Sabina's mental distress and noted that there was no evidence of premeditation or prior violent tendencies. The court ultimately sentenced her to 5 years in prison, taking into account her diminished responsibility and the time she had already spent in custody since her arrest in 2008. With this, Sabina became eligible for release in 2011. The trial sparked significant public and media debate. Many were struck by the short sentence for such a serious crime, questioning whether justice had been adequately served. Others viewed Sabina as a tragic figure whose actions were the result of an untreated and acute mental health crisis. Despite the legal resolution, the trial left many unanswered questions. The nature of the twins' shared psychosis, the role Ursula's absence played in Sabina's mental deterioration, and whether interventions could have prevented the tragedy remain mysteries. The courtroom offered closure in a legal sense, but did little to dispel the unsettling aura surrounding this extraordinary case. After recovering from her injuries sustained on the M6 motorway, Ursula was released from the hospital in September 2008. She returned to Sweden and subsequently relocated to the United States. Since then, Ursula has maintained a low profile. There is no detailed public account of Ursula's specific reaction to Sabina's killing of Glenn Hollinshead. The two sisters were separated at the time. Ursula was hospitalized for about 4 months after the M6 motorway incident for her injuries. Given their strong bond, it is reasonable to assume the incident would have profoundly affected Ursula, but she has remained silent and out of the public eye regarding her sister's actions. Upon Sabina's release in 2011, she, like her sister, withdrew from public attention, and her current whereabouts remain unknown. The story of the Eriksson twins is one of tragedy, mystery, and ultimately unanswered questions. It forces us to consider the fragility of the human mind and the lengths to which people will go to protect or destroy those they love. Their subsequent lack of public statements and retreat into private lives has contributed to the enduring mystery surrounding their story. Well, our time is up for today. What are your thoughts on this case? Do you believe their actions were the result of a shared psychosis, or was there something even more inexplicable at play? I'd love to hear your insights. Share your thoughts on my website or social media. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and as always, stay wise.